This business meeting to order. Today we're going to consider one bill, one nomination, and 19 General Service Administration resolutions. Senator Carper and I have agreed that we will begin voting at 9:45. At that time, I'll call up the items on the agenda. We will not debate the items on the agenda while we're voting. Instead, we'll debate the items on the agenda before we begin voting. We'll also be happy to recognize any member who still wishes to speak after the voting concludes. Today we'll consider S. 3051, America's Conservation Enhancement Act, or the ACE Act. I introduced the ACE Act along with Senator Carper, and then Senators Kramer, Cardin, Capito, and Van Hollen have all joined as co-sponsors. I thank them for working with me to craft this important piece of legislation. The ACE Act is a comprehensive bipartisan wildlife conservation bill. It protects both wildlife and wildlife habitat while protecting livestock from predatory species. It addresses threats to communities and native wildlife from invasive species, as well as from emerging disease. More specifically, the bill reauthorizes the important environmental programs, including the North American Wetlands Conservation Act, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation Act, and the Chesapeake Bay Program. The ACE Act also enshrines in statute partnerships among public agencies and other interested parties to promote fish conservation. The ACE Act addresses the terrible, degenerative, highly contagious brain disease known as chronic wasting disease. We've heard in several hearings how chronic wasting disease impacts wildlife, including degeneration of the brain, loss of bodily control, and untimely death. Detected nearly 40 years ago, chronic wasting disease has spread to 26 states, 4 Canadian provinces. The ACE Act establishes a chronic wasting disease task force at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. This task force will bring states, relevant federal agencies, scientists, managers, and farmers to the table. Together, they can better coordinate prevention and control efforts and target future research to address unanswered questions. The ACE Act helps livestock producers better manage and cope with the interactions between livestock and wildlife. It authorizes funds for livestock producers to carry out non-lethal activities that reduce livestock loss due to predation by federally protected species. It also compensates ranchers and farmers for livestock loss due to predation. The ACE Act also authorizes the Director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to issue permits to livestock producers that will help prevent black vultures and ravens from killing newborn calves and lambs. The ACE Act also includes studies that will help inform how to improve successful conservation and recovery of endangered and threatened species. The bill supports recreational hunting and sport fishing and the wildlife conservation dollars that these activities generate. By authorizing financial and technical assistance under the Pittman-Robertson Wildlife Restoration Fund to states for the promotion of hunting and recreational shooting. Together, these provisions will make America's wildlife healthier and more abundant while allowing rural communities to thrive at the same time. I encourage all my colleagues to support it. Today, we'll also consider the nomination of Robert Feitel to be the Inspector General of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. The Subcommittee on Clean Air and Nuclear Safety held a hearing on Mr. Feitel's nomination earlier this month. I'd like to thank Chairman of the Subcommittee, Senator Braun, for holding the hearing and assisting the full committee in considering Mr. Feitel's nomination. Mr. Feitel is well qualified and will bring a wealth of experience and expertise to this important position. Lastly, we will consider 19 resolutions to approve prospectuses providing for General Services Administration leases. I urge my colleagues to support passage of the bill, the nominee, and the resolutions we are considering today.
Cardin wanted to speak, and also you can put these in the record.
Okay. In a few minutes, we will hear from the ranking member as well as Senator Cardin. And while we're waiting, I will submit for the record a number of letters of stakeholder support. The committee has received statements in support of America's Conservation Enhancement Act, or the ACE Act, from stakeholders, including the National Wildlife Federation, the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, Trout Unlimited, Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, the Northeast Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, the American Sports Fishing Association, the Wyoming Game and Fish Department, the Wyoming Stock Growers Association, and without objection, I have unanimous consent to submit these letters for the record, and it is so done.